the Paramount Decree, also known as the Paramount Decision. Welcome to the early 1920s, where things like the kinetophone and the Great Train Robbery, talkies, and feature films, as well as color television, had shaped what would be an outstanding movement and rise in something the United States has enjoyed for decades upon decades, the film industry. Men like Charlie Chaplin releasing his first feature film, The Kid, in the late 20s, as well as Walt Disney releasing his first cartoon, set the standard and precedent for the Hollywood industry. But speaking of Hollywood, they controlled this entire industry, taking care of over 85% of the movie production in the mid to late 20s. Five powerful studios known as the Big Five, a group of Paramount, Warner Brothers, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, 20th Century Fox, and RKO, all controlled movie markets. These studios had a tight grip on the film industry, and there was no signs of them letting go. They did this through ownership, as well as a method they called block booking. Block booking worked like so. Distributors would package films, most of them mediocre, and they would have to sell them to theaters. This was a package deal, including no more than one good film, the rest being throwaways, but it was an all-or-nothing deal, so the theaters had to accept or they wouldn't get the one movie they wanted. There were also deals that were forced upon theaters on site. This was known as blind bidding. This might sound familiar, as nowadays we have a modern-day cable bundle, which includes cable, TV, phone, and internet. Regardless of which one you use or how many channels you watch, you must take the whole package and pay for it all, or take none of it. Now, in 1928, over 95% of the movie distribution was under the Hollywood studios' command. They set the admission prices, decided where films would be shown, and when. They controlled everything. The same year, the Federal Trade Commission identified the U.S. film industry as a monopoly, and court motions were filed. But the next year, in 1929, the Great Depression hit the United States and halted all court hearings, and nothing was enforced. In fact, a few years later, in 1933, to get the economy back on track, these studios were permitted to continue to block book and maintain complete command over distribution and ownership of films in theaters. 5 years later, in 1938, the major studios found another lawsuit coming their way. Sued by the Justice Department for monopolistic practices, RKO, Paramount, Universal, Warner Bros., and MGM were all being targeted yet again. These studios, by the end of the 30s, took over 90% of all the profits from U.S. films throughout that decade. Compromising in 1940, studios were allowed to keep their theaters, but block booking was now completely prohibited. Less than thrilled with this decision, stars such as Walt Disney, Mary Pickford, and Charlie Chaplin formed the Society of the Independent Motion Picture Producers. This organization aimed to preserve the rights of independent producers in an industry overwhelmingly controlled by the studios. In 1940, the New York court ruled that movie bidding must be competitive, and movies were to be individually licensed. Price fixing was also named prohibited, and joint ownership of theaters by distributors in Hollywood was also not allowed. Fast forward 2 more years, the Supreme Court begins investigating around the idea that vertical integration between producers of movies and their theaters was indeed creating a monopoly. In 1948, the Supreme Court affirms the prohibition of price fixing and ruled that block booking was a complete violation of the federal antitrust laws. The Paramount Decree ruled that the Big Five studios were guilty of monopolization of the industry and were forced to end ownership of all theater chains. They had to sell them, get rid of them completely, and cut their losses. After effects include a couple of things, one being called divestiture. This destroyed the Hollywood system. It ended the golden age. Studios had trouble acquiring talent, actors, directors, producers, and even crew members. In fact, things were so tough that massive amounts of unemployment in the film industry began to rise. Also in the 1950s, television was invented. People were staying home instead of going out to the theaters, so movie sale dropped. Stars knew they would survive if they did not go under contract, so the star system was created. These were free agent actors going from studio to studio with agents negotiating for them. Talent fees escalated to the millions because actors knew they could get it while they were independent. Businesses were mixing with screenplays and scripts, and it created friction between creators of the movies and lawyers of the actors reviewing the scripts. Business and movies and art were not meant to mix, and this is what was happening. By the end, Hollywood had seen its rise and fall, and a new day had been upon the movie industry. A day where things were fair, equal, and there was no more block booking.